Have you ever looked at a woman sitting alone in a crowded cafe, not scrolling, not scanning, just being, and wondered what story lives behind her stillness? Not the kind written in heartbreak or abandonment, but something else entirely, something deliberate. Have you ever sensed, without a word spoken, that her silence is not a void but a vow, made to herself, and to something older than the noise of wanting? Some women disappear from the narrative not because they are lost, but because they have outgrown the script. They slip away from the chorus of shoulds and musts, and begin writing from a deeper voice, one that does not ask for applause, only honesty. You don't see them broadcasting their solitude like a flag. You feel it, like the hush before a storm that never arrives, just hovers, deep and humming. There is a kind of woman who lives alone by choice. Not because she was left, not because she couldn't find someone, but because somewhere along the line, she heard a sound inside her, faint at first, like footsteps in the forest, and she followed it. Away from the noise. Away from the endless mirrors asking her to shrink, bend, break, and into something else. She walked into herself. This is not the beginning of a love story, nor is it a recovery arc from pain. It is a threshold, the moment a woman no longer defines herself in contrast to another's presence or absence. She does not live in waiting. She lives in becoming. And within that becoming are patterns, not habits, not rules, but psychological rhythms carved by fire, silence, and reclamation. These 7 patterns are not confessions. They are portals. They are the fingerprints of those who have stepped off the edge of the known and found a different kind of ground beneath them. Less paved, more honest. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." These women have awakened, not to ease, but to essence. Their lives are no longer built for display, but for resonance. Not to impress, but to align. So if you've ever felt the pull towards solitude, not as a wound, but as a window, this is for you. We are about to enter a different kind of terrain. One that doesn't ask you to perform, but to remember. Let us walk slowly now, into the shadowed beauty of the inner house, where these 7 patterns await. She begins by no longer apologizing for how she feels. That's the first shift, not outward, but inward. A quiet, irreversible refusal to abandon herself in the name of harmony. This is the first pattern, emotional sovereignty. It's not just that she feels deeply, many do, but that she claims those feelings as hers to navigate. She does not outsource her storms. If grief rises, she makes tea for it. If anger sharpens, she lets it breathe instead of burying it beneath a smile. It shows up in moments others don't notice. The way she pauses before replying to a message that stirs something sharp in her, the way she leaves a gathering early, not because she's overwhelmed, but because her body whispered, enough. This sovereignty isn't theatrical. It doesn't seek an audience. It lives in gestures, subtle, fierce, intact. And as she becomes the steward of her own emotional landscape, a second pattern begins to emerge, like a compass rising from the ocean floor. Deep inner referencing. She no longer asks, is this normal? Or, what will they think? Instead, her questions turn inward. Is this true for me? She moves through life like a tuning fork, sensing resonance not from trends, but from truth. You'll see it when she hesitates before saying yes, not because she's unsure, but because she's listening, not to fear, but to feeling. There is an old language within her, one she's learning to trust again. It speaks in sensation, in the way her chest opens or tightens, in the dreams that don't make sense but leave her shaken. Others might call her overthinker, but she's not stuck in thought. She's submerged in knowing. And then comes a pattern woven from ache, grief transmuted into wisdom. This isn't about a single heartbreak or a specific loss. It's about cumulative absence, all the moments she wasn't met, the times her truth was too much, the love that almost held her but didn't stay. She doesn't deny it anymore. She walks with it. It's not unusual to find her, late at night, lighting a candle not for romance, but for remembrance. Not crying, but feeling, deep, wide, full. Her sorrow has become soil. the kind that makes her roots stronger. You can hear it in the way she speaks, slowly, deliberately, like someone who knows how easy it is to shatter, like someone who no longer fears the breaking. She has learned that grief, when loved enough, turns into guidance. And in that space where others seek distraction, she builds altars. Not of religion, but of truth. Her past isn't erased. It's composted, made fertile, not forgotten. And in that fertility, something begins to bloom. The fourth pattern doesn't arrive with thunder. It settles in quietly, like dust on windowsills, easy to overlook unless you know where to feel. Ritualized living. In a world obsessed with novelty, she moves instead toward meaning. Her routines are not escapes from the unknown, but doorways into the sacred. When she makes her bed each morning, it's not for neatness, but as a gesture of self-devotion. The way she pours her coffee, slowly, deliberately, becomes a kind of incantation. Her evenings may include a journal, a worn novel, the same playlist she's used for years. Not because she is rigid, but because repetition can be holy when held with awareness. There's a lamp she turns on each night at exactly the same hour. A plant she whispers to. A drawer where she keeps her unanswered questions. Her rituals are not performance, they're presence. In solitude, they become scaffolding for the soul. And through them, she no longer waits for big moments to feel alive. She lets the ordinary initiate her. And from this rooted rhythm emerges something subtler, almost hidden, discernment over connection. This fifth pattern is often mistaken for distance or disinterest, but it's neither. She is not cold, she is clear. She has spent years being everything for everyone, being agreeable, accessible, digestible. Now she chooses. She chooses conversations that do not require her to shrink. She chooses relationships that do not punish her complexity. She chooses silences that restore, not silence that suppress. You might find her at a gathering, standing at the edge, smiling but not inserting herself. You might text her and she won't reply for hours, not out of disregard, but because she answers from wholeness now, not obligation. She is slow to say yes, and quicker to walk away when something bruises her spirit. Her solitude has sharpened her discernment, not like a blade, but like a filter. She no longer confuses proximity with intimacy. Some call it loneliness. She calls it honesty. And in that space of chosen distance, a creative fire begins to rise, quiet at first, like smoke from beneath the floorboards. The sixth pattern, desire alchemized into expression. The passion she once poured into relationships, into proving herself lovable, now channels into creation. Not always artistic. Sometimes it's the way she arranges her space, the way she cooks, the long walks where she speaks ideas into the wind. Sometimes it's a sketch, a song, a sudden urge to move her body in a room no one else enters. Her desire no longer demands an object. It has become a current, an engine, a force that doesn't ask to be fulfilled but to be felt. This alchemy is not accidental. It's the result of choosing herself again and again, not to isolate, but to ignite. She doesn't wait to be inspired. She listens to what stirs. She answers the muse not with perfection, but with presence. What the world sees as mystery is really just a woman in touch with her own fire, not using it to burn for someone else, but to illuminate her own path. The final pattern does not arrive with clarity, but with trembling. Integration of the shadow. It is not something she seeks, but something that insists, quietly, then urgently, until she can no longer look away. This is the moment she stops trying to edit herself into light. When she no longer says only the kind things, only the wise things, only the things that make her lovable. She begins to name what is raw, conflicted, unsightly. The resentment she carries towards softness. The envy that prickles when she sees ease in others. The hunger to be held, even after years of claiming she doesn't need to be. She no longer tries to exorcise these parts. She lets them sit. She makes space at the table. And when they speak, she listens, not to agree, but to understand. There are days when her shadow takes the form of silence, not peace. Of sharpness in her tone, not insight. and she does not spiral into shame. She recognizes, this too is part of the whole. Jung once wrote, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well." She has gone down. She's still going down. But now, there is less fear. She knows the difference between shadow and danger, between truth and trauma response, between the voice of her deepest intuition and the echo of past survival. In this phase, the self becomes a landscape she no longer needs to conquer. She tends to it. She doesn't always like what she finds, the unmet needs, the unresolved rage, the lingering doubts, but she tends to them as one would tend to an old tree, with patience, with presence. You might see it in small ways. The way she no longer over-explains herself. The way she walks away from someone mid-sentence when her body tightens without warning. The way she holds her own gaze in the mirror, even on days she feels undeserving. These aren't dramatic gestures. They are tectonic shifts. And the more she integrates what she once denied, the less she fractures, the less she needs to prove. She becomes less performative, more poetic, less polished, more potent. You can feel it in her presence, the way it lingers, not because she is loud, but because she is whole. These 7 psychological patterns are not milestones. They are spirals. They return. They deepen. They undo and rethread the fabric of her being again and again, not to fix her, but to make her real. And now, as she stands at the edge of her own reflection, not asking who she is, but simply being who she has become, the descent begins. But this time, it is not into solitude. It is into the sacred wilderness within. There is a silence that does not soothe, a stillness that does not calm. She reaches that point without knowing when it began, a slow unraveling, a soft erosion of the structures she built to hold herself steady. The rituals, once luminous, feel hollow. The solitude, once sacred, begins to echo back questions she thought she had already answered. This is not regression. It is not depression. It is something more ancient, more primal, the soul's descent. The moment when the inner world demands more than understanding, it demands surrender. It begins subtly. One morning, she stands at the sink, toothbrush in hand, and doesn't move for 5 minutes. Not frozen, just suspended. As if her body remembers something her mind refuses to say. The coffee tastes different. The pages of her journal feel foreign. Her name, when said aloud, no longer fits. She touches the edges of herself and feels them dissolving. The woman she became through self-awareness, discipline, healing, begins to flicker like a mirage. She is not breaking down. She is breaking through. But there is grief in this. A deep, aching grief, not for a person, but for the identity she can no longer wear. The wise woman. The whole one. The one who figured it out. That version of her, though beautiful, is also a mask now. And masks, even golden ones, eventually suffocate. The descent is not poetic. It is not graceful. She forgets appointments. She stops answering texts. She avoids the mirror. Her dreams become cluttered with symbols she doesn't understand. A fox hiding beneath the floorboards, a staircase that leads nowhere, a child holding a key to a door that keeps disappearing. These are not signs. They are signals. The psyche speaking in its native tongue. Image, feeling, sensation. She begins to weep in unexpected places. The grocery store aisle. The drive home. Folding laundry. Not from sadness, but from exposure. Her emotional skin has thinned. Every moment holds weight. Every sound a deeper note. Her solitude is no longer chosen, it claims her. Pulls her inward like tide over stone. And still, she resists. She reaches for the tools she once relied on, the affirmations, the breathwork, the spiritual insights, but they do not land. They feel like feathers thrown at a storm. This is not a place for fixing. It is a place for feeling. She lies awake at night, not restless, but alert. Listening for something. A voice. A thread. A sign that this unraveling is not her ending, but her initiation. And slowly, she begins to hear it, not outside, but from within. A low hum, a wordless murmur. Not a solution but a presence. Not light, but warmth. Not an answer but the permission to fall. This is the descent. And she is no longer watching it happen. She is in it. It is here, deep beneath the polished language of healing, that she meets the parts of herself that never learned to speak, only to ache. Not in the ways that draw attention, but in the quiet, corrosive ways. The flinch when someone praises her too much, the tension in her chest when she is offered kindness without condition, the faint nausea that comes not from hunger but from being seen. These are not wounds that bleed. They bruise in silence. And in this underworld, they have voices now. The descent does not ask for beauty. It asks for honesty. And honesty, in its rawest form, is often ugly. She remembers things she forgot she knew, how she learned to perform warmth instead of feeling it, how she smiled through betrayal, how she made her own needs invisible to keep the peace. These memories do not return as facts. They return as sensations. A wave of heat in her throat. A sudden chill behind her knees. She becomes a museum of echoes, her body the archive of everything she tried to transcend too soon. In this place, the feminine within her shifts form. She is no longer the nurturer, the muse, the healer. She becomes the devourer. The one who swallows illusions whole. Kali with red hands. Lilith with wild eyes. She begins to speak to the dark, not as enemy, but as mirror. She lights no candles here. She wants to see what the dark actually holds. And what it holds is her. The her before the becoming. Before the knowledge. Before the quiet perfection she learned to wear as safety. The girl who cried too loudly. Who loved too much. Who touched everything as if it might disappear, because it always did. That girl is not gone. She's been waiting. And now, they sit together. In a room with no windows. No exit. No light but breath. She does not try to comfort her. She does not try to change her. She listens. Not to heal her, but to receive her. It is the first time she does not abandon herself in the name of progress. The psyche, when trusted, knows how to rearrange itself. And so it begins. Not with breakthroughs, but with small silences inside larger ones. She no longer feels the need to define her solitude. It is not strength. It is not weakness. It is a womb. And something is forming. She stops moving for days. Not because she cannot, but because stillness has become its own kind of motion. She dreams now in archetypes. A lion with wings. A house submerged underwater. A staircase made of hands. She writes them down not to interpret, but to honor. Interpretation is for the mind. Honor is for the soul. And then one night, she wakes before dawn, heart racing but calm. She does not know why. She walks barefoot to the window. The sky is neither dark nor light. It hovers. That liminal space. That nowhere time. And she realizes, this is what she has become. Not this or that. Not healed or broken. She is between. And in the between, she finally belongs. She begins to notice that the silence has changed its texture. What was once heavy and unrelenting now holds her like warm water, not comforting in the way most imagine, but intimate, honest. There are no more edges to resist. She no longer needs the descent to end. She is no longer waiting to be returned to who she was before it began. That version of her has melted, and in the absence, something unnamed hums beneath her skin. Not a new identity, something older than that. Something like essence, stripped of costume. She speaks less, not out of fear or fatigue, but because words now feel sacred. Each sentence is a promise, and she has grown weary of breaking promises to herself. She only says what her body can stand behind. This is not withdrawal. It is precision. She does not explain why she no longer participates in certain conversations. She lets her absence speak, and it does, eloquently, with weight. the world still moves, frantically. People still reach out, expecting the softness she once offered so freely. But she no longer overextends. She does not bleed to be understood. If someone cannot meet her where she is, she does not descend to be held. She stays, grounded, unapologetic. Her self-betrayals have grown too expensive. She finds herself drawn to spaces that don't demand language. Museums, forests, abandoned chapels, places where the air itself carries memory. She walks slowly now, as if every step were being recorded not on film, but in spirit. Her solitude is no longer a location. It is a vibration, a frequency only those attuned to their own depth can feel. And yet, this is not enlightenment. She still feels everything, sometimes more than she wants to. There are days the ache returns, sharp, uninvited. She misses being held. She misses the ease of being misunderstood but adored. She misses softness shared in silence. And on those days, she does not reach for distraction. She wraps herself in a blanket and hums. She writes letters she'll never send. She reads poems that taste like medicine. But here is the difference now. She no longer confuses longing with lack. She can ache without abandoning herself. That, she realizes, is intimacy, not with another, but with life. With the waves that come and go. With the parts of her that still want what they cannot have. She lets them want. She lets them stay. In the mirror, she looks less polished, more elemental. Her eyes carry stories that do not need to be told. She wears herself loosely, like clothing that fits without clinging. There is no more urgency to arrive. She is not on a path. She is the path. Each breath a choice to remain real, even when it's inconvenient. Each moment an altar to everything she has met within herself and not turned away from. This is not transformation. It is revelation. What has been hidden is no longer buried. What has been waiting is no longer silent. She is no longer trying to become. She is finally willing to be. And then, without ceremony, without any great epiphany or flash of divine light, something settles. Not a conclusion, but a kind of gravity, the feeling of finally touching the ground of herself after drifting in emotional orbit for years. She doesn't smile more, doesn't glow like the stories say one does after healing. But there's a stillness now that others notice, even if they can't name it. She moves through rooms like water, not because she's invisible, but because she no longer pushes against the current of her own being. There is a strength in her now that does not require resistance. When someone interrupts her, she does not rush to reclaim space. She simply pauses, lets the silence do the correcting. When someone questions her solitude, asking if she's lonely, she no longer defends it. She just breathes, and in that breath lives the unspoken. I do not need you to understand my peace for it to be real. Her presence has changed. It no longer pulls or persuades. It simply is. And for those attuned to depth, it is magnetic. Not because it flatters, but because it reveals. She no longer entertains surface intimacy. She has tasted too much of herself to pretend she can be sated with fragments. She wants the kind of connection that begins in the shadow, that dances in the dark before ever reaching for the light. She often walks alone, not as a statement, but as a ritual. The streets know her footsteps. The sky, her questions. She talks to trees now, not in metaphor, but as participants in her unfolding. There's a particular stone wall near her apartment where she lingers at dusk, watching shadows stretch and curl across the pavement like ancient scripts. It reminds her, nothing is static. Even the dark moves. She writes more these days, not to be read, but to remember. Her journals are full of half-sentences, drawings, questions with no answers. Sometimes, she writes a word and stares at it until it dissolves into nothing but sound. This, too, is prayer. Not upward but inward. Not for salvation, but for resonance. There is music that makes her weep for no reason. Not because it triggers a memory, but because it mirrors her. Some mornings, she dances, eyes closed, feet bare, body unshaped by choreography. It is not performance. It is exorcism. It is joy. It is grief. It is everything in between. She still has longings. She still imagines being touched, being seen. But now, these longings don't hollow her. They feed her. They remind her she is alive. That even in her completeness, she is still becoming. And when love comes, if it comes, it will not arrive to rescue, to complete, or to awaken her. She is already here, rooted, whole, ready only for a meeting of equals, of sovereigns. A love that holds shadow as gently as light, that listens more than it speaks, that honors solitude not as distance, but as depth. This is the end of the descent, not because the darkness has lifted, but because she has learned to see in the dark. And in that seeing, she is not afraid anymore. She wakes without alarms now, not because there is nothing to do, but because her body has become its own guide, a quiet intelligence rising through her skin. She moves slowly, not from lethargy but from reverence, as if each step is a thread weaving her back into herself. The kettle whistles softly. She pours hot water over dried jasmine blossoms, watching them unfurl, small, gentle explosions of return. Nothing extraordinary has happened. And yet, everything feels different. The way the morning light spills across her floor. The way the dust glimmers rather than irritates. The way silence no longer presses against her, but leans in like an old friend. Integration does not arrive with applause. It arrives like this, unnoticed, until suddenly the ache is quieter and the breath deeper. She is not in a rush to become anything else. She is not craving transformation. She has made peace with what is. The questions she once carried like burdens now rest beside her like folded clothes, still hers, but no longer clinging to her shape. When she walks into the world, she does not armor herself. She doesn't need to. Her wholeness is not fragile. She can bend without breaking. She can listen without absorbing. She can witness without losing herself. There is a softness in her now, one that no longer hides its strength. It is in the way she touches the rim of a teacup before sipping. In the way she looks someone in the eye and does not flinch. In the way she says, no, with the same gentleness she says, yes. And beneath it all, there is rhythm, a pulse that belongs only to her. When she feels overwhelmed, she no longer escapes. She breathes. She lights a candle not to change the atmosphere, but to remember she is here. She hums, even off-key. She stretches in the hallway. She writes her name slowly in the steam of her bathroom mirror. These are not cures. They are communion. The soul, she now understands, does not need fixing. It needs listening. It needs space. It needs to be touched by presence more than progress. And so she lives now, not out of ambition but alignment. She no longer measures her worth in milestones, only in moments, the ones that feel like exhale, the ones that taste like truth. This is what healing becomes when it is no longer a task but a texture. Not a destination, but a home. She no longer narrates her becoming. She just lives it. Quietly, like a tide that no longer seeks the moon's permission. Her solitude is no longer an edge, it's a center. From it, she tends to her days not with urgency but with care, folding time into form, presence into gesture. The way she opens a window to let the light shift across the room. The way she lets a song play all the way through without skipping. The way she holds her own hand when the evening creeps in and memories press like fingertips against the ribs. She does not resist the past anymore. She lets it visit. She does not build altars to it, but she leaves the door open, knowing some ghosts don't need exorcism, only acknowledgement. And still, she blooms. Not like a spectacle, but like a slow-growing vine, patient, persistent, precise. She smiles now, not to please, but to connect. She listens, not to respond, but to receive. Her boundaries are not fences, they are invitations to meet her at the depth she now lives in. Most don't. And she no longer mourns that. The hunger to be seen has softened into the willingness to be known by herself first. Even the silence in her home sounds different now. Not empty, not echoing, but full. Alive with everything she once rejected, the boredom, the ache, the dull hours. All of it now part of the landscape she calls sacred. She no longer chases intensity to feel real. She trusts the slow burn, the in-between, the breath she doesn't have to earn. And in that trust, she is found, not by others, but by the truth she buried beneath performance. The truth that nothing is missing. That her aloneness is not a placeholder. That her enoughness is not conditional. She doesn't need to be remarkable to be worthy. She doesn't need to be desired to be alive. She doesn't need to be needed to be whole. And when she meets the eyes of another now, she does not ask to be chosen. She asks only to be met. Fully. Honestly. Without performance. Without pretense. Most look away. But when they don't, when someone stays, she stays too. Not out of need. Not out of fear. But out of truth. Because she can now hold both solitude and connection without dissolving into either. She knows where she begins and where she ends. She has become a boundary wrapped in grace. A woman who lives alone, yes, but never apart from herself. She walks one evening beneath a violet sky, the kind that hovers between light and shadow, where the day exhales and the night is still drawing breath. There's no destination in her steps, just movement, soft, grounded, free. A breeze brushes her shoulder, and she closes her eyes, letting it pass through her like a blessing. In that moment, she realizes, she is not waiting for anything to begin. She is not recovering from anything that has ended. She is simply in the middle, of herself, of time, of truth. And it is enough. This is what integration becomes, not a moment of triumph, but a quiet return to simplicity. She no longer seeks to be understood by the world. She understands herself. And in that understanding, she makes space for mystery. For paradox. For all the things she cannot name but feels in her bones. The pull of the moon, the weight of memory, the soft throb of becoming that never fully stops. She has made a life not of isolation, but of presence. The difference is everything. Her solitude is now textured, colored, rhythmic. It is filled with art and absence, laughter and longing, boundaries and breath. Some days are expansive, some narrow, but none are wasted. Even her stillness pulses. Even her silence has shape. And if you were to ask her, quietly, what changed, she would not speak in lessons or offer steps. She might smile. She might touch her chest. She might say, I stopped abandoning myself. Or maybe she would say nothing at all, and just invite you to walk with her, slowly, into the evening. Because she knows now, not all truths can be told. Some are only lived. So if you find yourself drawn to the quiet, if the noise of the world makes your soul feel far from home, if you've ever chosen solitude not out of fear but out of reverence, then maybe, in some way, you are walking this path too. And you are not alone in it. Let this be your whisper in the dark. Let it be your mirror. Let it be the silence that finally makes sense. If these words found you, it means something in you already knew. Stay close to that knowing. Let it grow. Let it become you. And if ever you wish to hear more of this voice, the one that speaks not from the surface but from the soul, you are welcome to remain here. This space will wait for you like solitude itself, soft, deep, and always ready to receive. And if you're hearing this in a quiet night, when the world has gone to sleep and it's just you and the spaces no one else sees, know this, the emptiness is not a mistake, it's a doorway. Not a place you've fallen into, but a place you are returning to. There's no need to cross it quickly. Just sit. Breathe. Listen. Because maybe, just maybe, you've grown deep enough to understand. Silence is not loneliness, it is sacred. And within it, you are still breathing, still blooming, in a way no one else ever could. If something in you stirred while listening, a memory, a truth, a feeling that never had a name, hold it gently. Like a wildflower growing from a crack in time. Fragile, but real. And if you ever wish to return to this space, to this voice that speaks not to impress but to remember something buried within, You are welcome. Stay. Subscribe, not as a routine, but as a sacred act of remembering. You do not need to be loud to be real. This place, this voice, will be here when you need it. In the stillness, in the shadow, in the softest light of self-knowing.